I have been to a lot of car shows since I've been doing the Vintage Vehicle Show. I've met a lot of Pontiac owners, people that restore them, people that rebuild them, and the thing that comes through over and over, especially when you're talking about GTOs, is a gentleman standing next to me, Mr. Jim Wangers. Jim, I've been told repeatedly today, is the god of GTOs. That's quite a title you hold.
Well, it's almost correct, as a matter of fact. It really is the godfather of the GTO. And, in a sense, I suppose that's kind of true. John DeLorean himself certainly was the father of the GTO. In working with the ad agency, we had an opportunity to really get close to the top-level management team at Pontiac. And in that capacity, both Bunky Knudsen, who was the general manager earlier on, and John DeLorean, who at one time was chief engineer, they learned in chatting with me that I really did have a pretty good handle on the market, and more specifically on what we were trying to do with Pontiac in the market. Pontiac, as you might remember, was in the midst of a recovery at that time. They were trying to change their image almost completely, and it was, in fact, the perfect time to make a tremendous statement in the consumer marketplace. And that was simply done by employing an old hot rodder's trick, something the hot rod community had been doing for years. Stuff a big engine in a little car.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. The 389 cubic inch full-size Pontiac engine was put into the intermediate size Tempest Le Mans chassis. Thus, the monster car was created. It was John DeLorean himself who wanted to call it a GTO, which stood for exactly what the car was. That's an Italian term, Gran Turismo Omologato, which is Italian for Grand Touring Homologated, which in effect means you built a car from parts that were all made by the same manufacturer, but designed specifically for other cars in their line.
Well, the GTO, besides being such a powerful car and what you just described, a real high-performance car, they also nailed it on the design of the car. They are gorgeous from the day they hit the showroom floor. People have been in love with GTOs, and I don't think that's diminished at all since they first came out. They just, people just went crazy for them. When you think of some people, a lot of people talk about muscle cars, the first thing that comes to mind is a GTO.
Once the car was created, John DeLorean turned to me and he said, "All right, Wangers, it's up to you to tell the world about this car." Well, fortunately, at the time, I was smart enough to have been able to recognize this incredible mother lode of buyers that were coming into the marketplace, the so-called baby boomers. Here we were with a car aimed right at that market. We did the obvious things. We put hood scoops on it. We put dual exhausts on it. We put bigger wheels and tires. We lowered it a little bit, We made it look and sound like exactly what we were promoting. The idea of it being a muscle car really didn't dawn on us at that early state. That came on a little bit later.
The Judge GTO, is that the top of the pecking order in the world of GTOs?
Well, this happens to be my car. The Judge itself happens to be my absolutely favorite GTO of all of them. In fact, I think I could say my favorite Pontiac of all of them. And of course, no Judge, in my opinion, is a Judge unless it's carousel red, which is the color we introduced this car in. It was, frankly, in 1969, kind of an outrageous statement. So were the pop art stripes that you can see. So were the emblems. This particular one made out of pop art approach. The whole concept of the car, in a sense, was sort of a spoof on what we were building all through this whole muscle car arena. But it also had the best performing engine that we knew how to build.
So that's where my question is going next. What set the Judge apart from the next one down on the GTO list?
Well, the fact that it had this pop art striping, it had a rear deck spoiler, which was a stand-up blade-type spoiler. And if you can believe, in 1969, that spoiler was outrageous. Nobody had done anything like that, put a stand-up rear-deck spoiler on a production car.
Probably the most important question on the viewer's mind: who came first, the judge or Sammy Davis Jr. saying, "Here comes the judge"?
Well, that's a good question. There's no question about the answer either. There was the old laugh-in television show, and part of that show was that character, Sammy Davis Jr., some occasions, that came on the show screaming, "Here come the judge, here come the judge." Well, John DeLorean, who was heading up the division at the time, said, every time I turn on television, somebody's screaming at me, "Here comes the judge. Let's bring him a judge." Wow. So John DeLorean named that car the Judge.
He's a smart man.
Deserves all the credit for it.
Well, I think it's without a doubt you are the judge when it comes to GTOs. You're the man that knows everything there is to know about them. You have books out there. You're the guy that goes to authenticate a lot of these vehicles out in the country. And I would like to say it's been a pleasure to have you on the Vintage Vehicle Show, and an honor.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you.